A true story of a hillbilly sharpshooter drafted in World War I. Despite being a pacifist, he ends up becoming a war hero in the great 1941 war film, Sergeant York.
You had your thumb sticking straight up in the air, just like that.
Oh, yeah, that gives me balance.
Oh, it gives you balance, does it? You ready? Aim. Fire.
How?
They won't get me. I'll go back in them hills.
You ain't even put hounds on your trail and 40 no matter how far back you go.
Then they better not catch up with me, or they'll be a wishing they hadn't.
Now, for certain, the best part of this movie is the titled character, Alvin York, who is played by Gary Cooper, who won his first of 2 Academy Awards for this portrayal as Alvin York. And there's a few things to credit to Cooper for this. I mean, one, pretty much the film stands on its own because of his performance, which is terrific. The real Alvin York actually said, because there was some talks about the movie and whether or not it was pro-war or anti-war, I'll leave you to decide from watching it what you thought it was. But Alvin Cooper wasn't sure that he wanted the movie to be done, and because he didn't want to glorify his killing of German soldiers, which, for those of you who don't know, Alvin York, who is considered to be probably the greatest war hero of World War I, was openly a conscientious objector, which means he was against killing because the Bible said, that thou shalt not kill. Which is the big conflict of the story, is that he was drafted to go to war, but he doesn't want to go to war because of his pacifism, and he ends up really impressing his drill sergeants and those who were his superior officers. So he was definitely qualified, particularly as a sharpshooter, but he did not want to kill, and that was the big conflict was serve your country or serve the Lord. Again, it's the same thing with is it a pro-war film, is it an anti-war film, and that made it really hard for Alvin York to decide whether or not he wanted to do. But he said one thing is that I will not approve of this film unless Gary Cooper plays me. And that was a huge compliment for Cooper, who was a big fan of Alvin York's, and they even became lifelong friends at the end of the film until Gary Cooper's untimely death in 1961. And speaking of deaths, the project was such a big deal to Alvin York, and his pacifism meant so much to him that it was said that on his deathbed, he begged God for forgiveness for killing all those soldiers. So it did mean a tremendous lot to him, even though he did some tough things that he had to do. Now, what makes this an interesting film, particularly, is because it was made in 1941, and of course, the world was facing a Second World War, and the United States wasn't quite involved yet, or it wasn't involved at all. And America had developed an isolationist kind of point of view. I don't mean to be pouring out history, but this kind of helps you get an appreciation for the time of the film. Again, there were some critics who were looking at Sergeant York as a pro-war film or an anti-war film, when it was just better for the general public to just not talk about it, to kind of sweep it under the rug, pretend it doesn't exist, or that it's in some faraway land and such like that. And although it is a World War I film, it does have some huge underlying messages about the right thing to do, the necessary evil of war, and there are many who did believe that World War II was a necessary war, and even Alvin York believed it, and he went on record saying that we should go to war in World War II. I mean, it did win, I believe, 2 Academy Awards. Of course, one of them being Gary Cooper's, which it's like no matter how much you sneer at the film because of the times, you can't deny that Gary Cooper did a tremendous job, and he certainly did, and I believe that he was the person to win that year. But just the whole Hollywood scene, if you look at it beyond just what America was going through, Hollywood in those days particularly were pretty cowardly when it came to making statements for war and war involvement. I mean, of course, when we were openly in war, Hollywood was doing the best it could to pump out propaganda films and stuff like that, but because of the power that cinema has, it was dangerous to do almost any kind of war film at that time, because it was just they didn't want to get people rowdy or turn them off to anything like that. So it was certainly a bold statement to make this film, and I'm all for that kind of controversy. Another notable that might be an interesting fact, but I don't know if I should say it because it might, I don't know, make me discuss it towards the film. But Mrs. York, Gary Cooper's co-star, Joan Leslie, was actually, I believe, 16 years old when she started the film. If not 16, 17 or 18. And Gary Cooper was in his 40s. I think he just turned 40 like when they started production. And it's funny because a couple of years later, Joan Leslie did Yankee Doodle Dandy with James Cagney, and there was just as much of an age gap between those two. So, like, and I believe I said this before. It's, back in those days, it was okay, it was just pretend, it was theater, like, it's not like they're sleeping with each other, but, I mean, who knows, like, whatever, to each his own. But it didn't affect the film for me, anyway. It was a nice story about, like, Joan Leslie, how shy she was, because she was such a newcomer, and she was even, like, still going to school, and just, like, how much pressure she felt seeing Gary Cooper, and, he was, as she describes him, this tall, stoic, good-looking man. She was just very nervous, and she described Cooper as, like he came up to her and he called her by her character's name, and, he was just very formal, and just, she took it as a seasoned actor taking all the pressure off of a novice, and, just a testament to the kind of man that Gary Cooper was on and off the screen. Truly one of the great legends of all cinema. And another testament to Gary Cooper would be director Howard Hawks, who, if anyone knows their cinema, Howard Hawks, one of the great directors of all time. He was a little nervous when he would be shooting, because, I mean, primarily Cooper was in all the scenes, and he would always feel like he's not getting enough out of Gary Cooper. Like, he's not really doing much. And then he would look back at the dailies, and he would just see this incredible substance and subtext from Gary Cooper. And he was, he was such a master at that. Cooper, I'm talking about. He was such a master at knowing what the camera was picking up, what he was doing, the subtle nuances, and all the slight facial expressions, and he was great at portraying thought, and you knew what he was thinking. And that really makes him, in my eyes, like, so terrific, very subtle performer. And he's just a true representation of the American man, or like the image of the American man. Just a truly great legend. And the reason I keep talking about him so much again is because, he is the title character. It's mostly about his story, and a tough burden to pull off is, like, when you're the primary, you're in every scene, and you are the reason for the film's success or lack of success. So in my opinion, Gary Cooper really makes the movie a timeless classic. Now, the big question I'm going to pose to you is, do you see it as a pro-war film or an anti-war film? And you think about that, and that's pretty much it.